first let's talk about overseeding fescue. Maybe it's just me because I've been doing that. I just did it like last week, and I got all those little green little sprouts popping up, and nothing is really, probably something is, but it's pretty darn satisfying to sow those seeds out there, and then you start seeing them actually come up, and your yard start to green back up. So it's time to overseed.
It is, and it is a perfect time. And as early in the fall as we can get it, and like you said, as soon as you get that green growth growing, that's just a heads up and more ahead of the game than what you will be. So, now's perfect time. We've been getting quite a bit of calls this summer on fescue, and it not looking very good. And and I think one of the reasons because we were kind of moist. We had a lot of moisture in the air, a lot of humidity. That in turn, if you've listened to us any at all with that disease triangle, moisture in the air, perfect conditions for disease, and that's kind of what we've had. Brown patch has taken a bunch of our fescue out. It's been worse on other years, but it is that time of year where you go in and brown patch comes in and basically wipes everything out, or spots it up bad enough where we need to go in and renovate or reseed or overseed, whatever term you use would be. But nope, now's a good time, Tom. I noticed you've been out in the nursery shopping a little bit for seed, and that's another question we get. What kind of seed is the best seed? And what I like to say is they're all pretty decent. All of the higher end seeds, don't buy the cheapest seed. But the higher end seeds, it's probably, you're probably looking at about $2 a pound. Tom, what do you remember what you paid for your seed?
That's about right. I got a 50-pound bag, and it was a little over $100.
So about 2 pounds, $2.50 to $2 a pound is probably what you can expect. The smaller the bag, the more you're going to pay. But, I would stay away from those seeds under $1. Those are more, we have two types of fescue we have, that we have in Oklahoma. We have a forage type fescue that is bred and grown to grow forage for cattle, for horses, things like that. So that type is going to grow up, and it's going to be real tough, real thick bladed, versus a turf type, which is what we're going to be talking about and what you need to look for, a turf-type tall fescue when we're out there searching for what kind of seeds to buy. Another thing to look for is multiple varieties in one box or in one bag. A multiple variety of one tall fescue is called a blend of fescue. So I'm going to use a term 5-star. That's a retail name that you may see quite a bit. And that product usually has 5, that blend usually has 5 turf-type tall fescues in there mixed up. Tom, you was telling me about Heartland Supreme. That is a mixture. You may talk about that mixture a little bit.
Well, it is a mixture. There's 5 different grass seeds in there. As you can see on the graphic here, just for example, they've got one that's called an Avenger. There's a Titanium, a Valkyrie. They've got some perennial rye, and they've got some bluegrass in there. So hopefully one or most or all of those are going to latch on and grow in your yard.
And that's kind of the ideas of mixing a few of those species in. I think, you said they had a turf-type tall fescue. You've seen the screen. 3 turf-type tall fescues, 1 ryegrass, and then 1 bluegrass. So the ryegrass, it tends to really germinate pretty fast. So you seeded a week ago, and a lot of those seeds that you're seeing right now, that ryegrass is probably going to take 3 or 4 days to germinate. So it's going to be real quick. The fescue and the bluegrass, it's going to be a little slower, maybe 10 days, 7 to 10 days after, you seed. So the ryegrass is thrown in there to really get some green up pretty quick. And then the bluegrass is in there. What happens, our fescue can sometimes get a few other diseases that may show up that bluegrass does not get affected by. So if we have another species in there like bluegrass, then if that disease attacks our fescue, then we're still able to mask or hide that disease with the bluegrass in that mixture. So pretty neat deal that OSU and other universities have kind of done some research on the numbers and percentages. Not much percentages, as you could have seen. You're looking at about a 5% volume for ryegrass and bluegrass, and then about a 30% on the fescue. So the majority of it's fescue, and that's what we want. But then we throw some other things in there to kind of take that, monoculture of that one type of grass away, where we can mask or hide that disease, Tom.
Right.
So it works pretty well.
So if we're going to reseed, first thing we do, we got our seed picked out. I usually tell people it depends on your yard really, but if you have bare spots with dirt, to rough that up, grab a rake and rough it up a little bit. Just don't put your seed out on that hard soil. But obviously, if you're going to be overseeding in the turf, you can't do that roughing up very well. But I always rough it up first.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they ask me on the phone, hey, do I need to aerify? Do I need to poke some holes where I can drop them seeds in those holes? And the aerification is okay. It's not necessarily needed every time. And a lot of times we're in shadier areas where it's a little more moist, where our fescue grows. So it doesn't always need an aerification. It doesn't always hurt anything either. So, but don't just aerify. I mean, there's got to be a reason. But I like to rake things up. And what I tell people is the more work you do on that ground, tilling it as much as tilling it, on into just using a rake and roughing it up off that, that crusty layer off. And then getting that dead fescue back off there, exposing that soil so you can have good soil to seed contact is why we rake that and why we get that soil exposed. Because when that little bitty seed sprouts, the first thing coming out is a root. So that root's going down and it's going to start trying to pull up moisture. And if it can start pulling up moisture, then it's going to send a shoot up, a leaf. And then after that leaf comes up, then it's almost ready to start going. So, so no, we're getting into that. And, the one of the major things we do is we put too much seed on the ground. We end up overpopulating it. And it works great. We can double the rates and it'll look good for a month or two. But then what happens, they're so close together, they outcompete themselves and they end up making a weaker plant that if it dries out or if some disease happens, then it'll choke them out and kill it real quick. So it's better to be on the light side. My numbers are about 5 to 8 pounds on a pretty blank lawn per 1,000 square feet of seed. So 5 to 8 for just kind of an overseed where it doesn't have very much. And then you can kind of work your way down depending on how thick your current grass is at the moment. So, don't put down too much seed is kind of my bottom line on that, Tom.
Yeah, I know I've been guilty of that mistake as well. And also the dreaded, you put out your seed because we're supposed to have a nice light rain, and then it pours down and all your seed washes down the hill, and you got this row of really
big piles. And it's the same as fertilizer. People tend to want to fertilize before rain, but then it could wash it all away. So just keep that in mind. And it's not hard. You don't need to water once we seed. Then we need to water. We need to water every day. Maybe on days like today where we're in high 80s, you may need to water in the morning, and you may need to water in the afternoon for a while. The main thing is to keep that soil bed moist as possible. Not wet, just moist. So, within a week, we ought to be seeing some green like you was talking about. And then within 2 weeks, we really ought to be looking pretty good. And that's kind of where you said your lawn was at, Tom.
Well, it's starting to get there. It's kind of fun to sit there and watch those little green blades start coming out of the ground when you just got bare dirt. We had some work done on our yard, and so it's just bare dirt. So we're starting from scratch all over again. But I do think I have learned just from personal experience, like what you said, the watering is the key. If you just sprinkle that seed out there and don't keep it wet and moist, it's going to lay out there and dry up and maybe die in the sun, even possibly get baked.
Yeah, well, and the bad thing, once that little root that I was talking about earlier starts germinating and going down, and then even that shoot that comes up, that's kind of the main time, and we cannot dry that out because that's little tender cells there. And if it dries out, it's going to kill it, and you've wasted your time, and you're going to have to reseed. So about 3 days in, be sure and keep that water going. And, hopefully we can get it up there where those roots can start pulling up moisture. So very critical time at that point. But, the main thing is to not put too much seed down. Another question we get a lot is, when do I fertilize? And basically, I like to look ahead, and soil samples are great. It's a good tool to have if you don't know what you've got in your soil. Your P and K, like we've talked about, your phosphorus and potassium, if our levels are not, we need to correct the levels on the P and K at this point. And then we can start adding some nitrogen in a few weeks. My answer to them on when to fertilize is about the time you need to mow it. So about, 2 inches, 3 inches tall. Once you need to get the mower out, then it's probably time to start mowing a little bit and start, going, fertilizing as well. So yeah, we've got it seeded, we've got it germinated, and we're almost to the point now where we're getting ready to mow. So then we can start talking about fertilizing. So during the fall, you probably need to fertilize it 2 times. I would probably fertilize it, coming up in a couple weeks, and then about 30 to 40 days. And that's with just nitrogen. Urea, I love urea, which is 4600 at a rate of 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet. That's all we need. It doesn't take much. And that urea will get it up. That's nitrogen that'll it'll get it growing. And then you should start having to mowing again every week or so on fescue during the fall.
We're talking about overseeding fescue now primarily because fall's the best time to do that. You can do it in the spring, but you really got to fight it and keep it watered and baby it to help it have a better chance of success. But if we reseed in the fall, it's got all fall and winter and spring to get better established for the summer that's going to hit us more likely.
Yeah, and another thing you're going to hear us say, in the future months is once those leaves start falling, be sure and get them off there because, we tend to want to put fescue underneath trees. That's where Bermuda grass doesn't grow. And fescue will survive, but it won't thrive because it needs quite a bit of sun. It doesn't like shade. It likes being in the sun. So if we got it underneath a tree, once those leaves fall off, we got to get them off that canopy of that grass. That way it'll start picking up some of that sunlight and try to get as much growth as we can before we get into that stressful time when those leaves get back on the trees coming up in April. So again, we said we're doing things now for later on, and it's definitely the case with fescue.
Well, and there's really, it's quite depressing if you have done all the work to get your seed and you've watered and it's up and it's going great and the leaves start falling out there in your yard and you can't get out there in time, and then you get out there and all that nice new pretty green is all yellow.
Yeah. But again, you don't hardly use tough and fescue in the same sentence, but it's pretty tough, especially in the fall. It's cool enough. You're not using a lot of moisture. So it will withstand a little bit of leaves on top, but as soon as you can get out there and get it off there, the better off you're going to be, because the idea is preparing fescue for the July and August months, or June. We can even say June, July, and August months when we've got hot, we've got disease pressure. And it's just not a good time to grow, and then we've got canopy from the leaves on the trees. So We're preparing everything for those hot summer months coming up in 2021.
All right. So now is the perfect time to be doing it. The weather's great. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It's just right. And, if you need to, or we're thinking about it, get out there and get some seed and get after it, because it's not going to get much better than this, in my view.
Nope, it's not. But again, don't put too much seed down. Let's start there. I'm guilty as everybody else. So try to stay below at least 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet. If you're putting that on there, getting a little heavy. So be careful. So happy watering and get out there and get it planted.
Yeah. All right.